Welcome, dear viewers, to a world where darkness and mysticism meet in the creepiest forms. Here, in this abandoned corner of the internet, we will delve into the darkest corners of the human imagination. Prepare for awe-inspiring horror, as each of our stories is imbued with sinister secrets that lurk in the darkness of the night. Scary stories that remain beyond your imagination are waiting for you on our channel. Don't forget to turn on the lights, get comfortable, and hold on tight, because now we are going into the world of nightmares. Are you ready for it? Then welcome to our scary story.
The chilling wind of late November 1981, or perhaps it was 1982, I can't recall with precision, still lingers in my memory. Kendall, the small town by the northern border, had been my home since '69, and the law had been my charge since '73. Retirement had its perks, mostly stories shared over a cup of coffee with old pals or tales spun for eager grandchildren, their eyes wide, asking, "Grandpa, did you ever use your gun? What was the craziest thing that happened?" I'd usually regale them with tales of high-speed chases or the time a bullet narrowly missed me. These stories had a neat beginning and end where the good guy, yours truly, always came out on top. But the truth is different. It's not the heroic chases that haunt me. It's a cold, gray morning that's etched into my memory. That day began with a call from Jonathan, a young Algonquin lad whose father I'd known well. Jonathan's voice trembled as he spoke, saying something was wrong with one of his horses. Having heard that a group of hikers had recently gone missing near his reservation land, I feared the worst. I grabbed the keys to the police pickup, knowing the rugged terrain I'd encounter. As I navigated the concealed path leading to Jonathan's house, nestled by the forest's edge, a sense of unease gripped me. I'd been there before, back when his father was still around. A stoic man, rooted in tradition, who'd passed on a few years back. Jonathan had always been close to his father, and his death had shaken the boy to his core. Parking next to a dark green truck at the base of a long incline, I noticed the horse stables, eerily silent with no sign of the animals. The cabin, a blend of traditional craftsmanship and modern additions, stood as a testament to the legacy left by Jonathan's father. Climbing the steep path, the weight of my years bore down on me. By the time I reached the cabin steps, I was out of breath. A knock on the door yielded no response, but an unsettling stench hung in the air. Following the source of the smell, I called out to Jonathan. I found him, shock painted on his face, next to a hole in the fields, and there, lying next to him, was the mutilated corpse of one of his horses. Gasping, all I could muster was, "Christ, Jonathan, what in God's name happened here?" In the backdrop of the thick woods, Jonathan pointed to the ravaged body of the horse, his voice trembling. "Found him this way near the trees. I can't explain what happened." Even though our interactions in the past had been limited, I could detect an unusual tension in his voice, like he hadn't had a wink of sleep in days. As I watched him drag the horse's remnants into a pit, the weight of the situation hit me. Instinctively, I picked up a shovel, assisting him in burying the creature. The gashes and wounds on the animal suggested a bear might have done it, but Jonathan quickly dispelled that notion. "Sheriff, there's something unnatural in these woods. Been observing it for weeks now, lurking amongst the cedars," he said, almost whispering. Pausing my shoveling, I asked, "A bear, perhaps?" He vehemently shook his head. "No, it's a spirit. I've seen it with my own eyes." Now, I'd heard tales from the Algonquin folks about spirits and legends, but I'd always taken them with a grain of salt. Yet the distress in Jonathan's voice and his ashen complexion gave me pause. Trying to offer some comfort, I inquired, "When did you discover your horse in this state?" Jonathan recounted. "Ever since I felt its sinister presence, I started keeping the horses close, not letting them near the woods. But that night, one broke free. The chilling screams of the creature, accompanied by an eerie, guttural sound I'd never heard before, pierced the stillness. Come dawn, I found him, torn apart on my yard. He spoke of the temperature dropping abruptly and of fleeting glimpses of a tall, shadowy figure just beyond the tree line, always evading direct light. His recounting felt surreal, like he was caught in a waking nightmare. Trying to ground the situation, I thought of reasonable explanations. Maybe the isolation had taken its toll on him, or perhaps substances were at play. But the sight of the mutilated horse was tangible, undeniable evidence that something was amiss. Even a bear wouldn't leave its kill in such a grotesque state. Suddenly, Jonathan tensed, his gaze darting towards the trees. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, but I heard nothing. Concerned for his well-being, I advised, "Jonathan, you need some rest. Maybe spend the night in town." He shook his head. "Can't leave my horses alone with that thing around." Feeling a debt to his family, I offered, "I'll come back this evening. Stay the night, watch over things. You get some sleep." He hesitated but eventually agreed, probably seeing no better option. After ensuring he was relatively settled, I drove back to the station, informing my secretary of my plans. I then armed myself with a shotgun. Monster or not, I wasn't taking any risks with whatever mutilated that horse. Before night descended, I informed my family about my commitment for the night, hoping to give Jonathan, and maybe myself, some peace of mind. The concern in my wife's eyes was palpable as I relayed Jonathan's plight and my decision to help. She vehemently protested, "It doesn't feel right. Don't go." My children, having overheard the conversation, their eyes wide with terror, clung to me. I tried to assure them, using every bit of my persuasive skills. The delay meant that by the time I set off, the sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting a golden hue that hinted at the impending darkness. The reservation lay swathed in the last remnants of twilight. My truck's headlights illuminated the way, slicing through the gathering gloom. The closer I got to Jonathan's place, an uneasy sensation crept over me. Upon reaching his property, my alarm heightened. His truck was conspicuously absent. Though momentarily disconcerted, I told myself he might have parked elsewhere. I felt obligated to inspect the place nonetheless. Jonathan's home appeared both ancient and eerie. An old-fashioned oil lantern cast a feeble light outside, while a soft glow emanated from the windows, giving the house a gothic ambience. Steeling my nerves, I retrieved the shotgun, tested the revolver on my hip, and set forth with a flashlight in hand. The trek uphill towards the house felt interminable, my surroundings growing increasingly opaque. It was disconcerting how the tales I'd heard started affecting my perception, making every rustling leaf or creak sound ominous. Guided by the lantern's frail illumination, like a sage navigating by starlight, I eventually reached the house's entrance. To my surprise, the front door stood slightly open. Clutching the shotgun, I announced myself, "Jonathan, it's me." Silence answered. Pushing the door open with caution, the room inside was a mix of tribal decorations. A faded animal skin draped over an old-fashioned couch, and a beautiful dream catcher hanging above it. But my inspection was interrupted by a sickening odor, so overpowering I had to retreat momentarily to gulp in fresh air. Gathering my wits, I delved deeper into the house. To my right lay a rudimentary kitchen. A faucet dripped monotonously into a sink, and on the stove sat a pan with some burnt remnants still warm to touch. 2 doors led to rooms off a narrow hallway. I painstakingly checked both, my senses on high alert, but they were devoid of any occupants. However, the nauseating stench persisted, amplifying my anxiety. Suddenly, I remembered the horses. Racing to the stables, my flashlight's beam revealed empty stalls with doors either ajar or unhinged, suggesting a hasty exodus or forceful escape. Panic bubbled up within me. Should I leave? Call for reinforcements? An owl's piercing cry jolted me out of my thoughts. Glancing up, I spotted a magnificent white bird, its unblinking eyes gazing deeply into mine. With a graceful sweep of its wings, it soared away. The soft light of the rising moon cast eerie shadows, improving my visibility marginally. I systematically circled the house, the forest's edge appearing like an impenetrable abyss, defying even my flashlight's strong beam. The temperature took a nosedive, sending shivers down my spine. Pulling my coat tighter, I stumbled upon a chained cellar door, one half of which had been violently breached. Several bullet holes punctuated its surface. Trying to get a glimpse inside, I aimed my flashlight through the broken panel. It revealed a descending flight of grimy concrete steps, which disappeared into the inky blackness below. My focus on the oddity of the cellar was disrupted by a peculiar noise, an unnatural stirring from the surroundings. Swiveling around, I directed the flashlight's beam into the encompassing obscurity, but nothing materialized before me. I methodically swept the light over the tree line, attempting to discern any abnormalities. As I ventured deeper with my gaze, I found the flashlight's radiance diminished considerably, as if the forest itself was swallowing the illumination. Amid the dense vegetation, one particular tree caught my attention. It seemed anomalous, with a grayish hue, in stark contrast to the greenery around. As I scrutinized it, I realized it was not reminiscent of any flora native to this area, or, frankly, any region I was familiar with. It possessed a sort of alien demeanor, its branches, looking gaunt and frail, drooped towards the ground, and its base appeared curiously desiccated. As the wind rustled the nearby plants, this tree remained eerily motionless. Lost in my observation, I tried relating its features to any botanical knowledge I possessed, but my contemplation was abruptly interrupted. Astonishingly, the tree morphed into a sentient being, standing upright, and with a speed that defied human comprehension, it blurred into the depths of the forest. In a state of shock and disbelief, my finger instinctively squeezed the trigger, discharging the shotgun, but the creature was long gone. What had I witnessed? My brain grappled with the reality of it, a fleeting monstrous visage, imprinted temporarily on my mind. I could barely discern specifics, but an overwhelming sensation of trepidation coursed through me. Positioning myself against the house's wall, I cautiously circled it, ensuring the forest remained within my line of sight. Every couple of steps, I'd halt, intensifying my auditory senses, listening for any anomalies. Through this painstakingly slow movement, I finally reached the cabin's front, clambering over the porch's railing to further limit the creature's possible avenues of approach. But this brief vulnerability, turning my back to the forest, sent waves of panic through me. As I settled, a haunting wail permeated the atmosphere, so intertwined with the gusts of wind, it was nearly impossible to pinpoint its origin. After an eerily prolonged silence, the biting cold impressed upon me the need to evacuate. My truck, still parked undisturbed down the hill, was my best means of escape. Adopting the same strategic movement, I commenced my descent, treading on the damp, slippery ground. Every step felt torturous, with the ever-present feeling of being ensnared by the encompassing abyss. But as I neared the foot of the hill, a familiar howl echoed once again. I brandished my flashlight, revealing a pair of large, luminous eyes. The same owl, imposing in its stature, perched regally above, scrutinizing me. But relief was short-lived. An abrupt commotion from the truck's direction, followed by a distinct thud, compelled me to swivel around. The truck oscillated slightly, its suspension groaning under some unseen force. Cautiously, I dropped down. Inspecting underneath, it was vacant. Similarly, a quick glance at the truck bed revealed nothing. Wasting no more moments, I clambered inside the truck, fumbling to turn the ignition. Upon turning the ignition, a surge of skepticism overcame me, doubting if the vehicle would spring to life amidst such unsettling circumstances. However, to my profound relief, the engine roared, seeming like a prayer answered in that eerie desolation. As I shifted into reverse, I couldn't resist stealing a final glance at the house. Its lights had dimmed, but against the backdrop of my truck's muted yellow illumination, I felt an eerie sensation, as if I was being observed from within. Through the windows, my heart pounded relentlessly, and my instincts screamed at me not to overstay my welcome any longer. Thus, I sped away, veering onto the highway, making haste to distance myself from the scene of the surreal encounter. The haunting tableau of that residence would forever be etched in my memory. But what transpired the following day was arguably more harrowing. I remained reticent about my personal experiences, feeling it too outlandish to share. When probed, I merely reported that Jonathan and his equines were mysteriously absent. However, John's green truck was discovered, having crashed about 10 miles south. Its front end nestled in a ditch, rendering it inoperable. Dry blood was smeared across the dashboard, and a bloodied Bowie knife lay discarded amidst various garments strewn nearby. 2 distinct trails led into the woods, one eerily absent of any footwear, which provided ample grounds to procure a search warrant for Jonathan's abode. By afternoon, accompanied by my deputies, I returned to that accursed property. Inside, the house was deceptively pristine, almost frozen in time since my previous visit. Seizing a solitary moment, I scoured the grass, retrieving and pocketing the shotgun shell I had discharged. My primary concern lay beneath those chained cellar doors. Upon prying them open and descending, a horrendous reality confronted me. Fragments of bones, scared with unmistakable human bite marks, were strewn about, while chains drenched in dried blood adorned the walls. My mind raced to the thought of the vanished hikers, and my worst fears were confirmed when the DNA extracted matched Sally Miller, one of the missing women. The sinister revelations about Jonathan's heinous activities eclipsed any horror I had experienced thus far. Despite exhaustive efforts, Jonathan's whereabouts remained a mystery. His tale seemingly concluded with those fading footprints in the woods. I've only confided in 2 individuals about that night: my beloved wife, Martha, and a trusted colleague, Bernard. Martha, always pragmatic, accepted my account without skepticism. Thereafter, she grew particularly wary of the forest, ensuring our children never ventured too close. Bernard, on the other hand, offered a more rational explanation, suggesting perhaps it was an ill-malnourished bear. I never contested his theory, for how could I articulate what I felt in my bones? I may not have witnessed a divine entity in those woods, but I could not ignore the malevolence emanating from that tree that haunted my dreams. With time, I chose early retirement, leaving the unresolved enigma of the case behind. In the recesses of my heart, I realized I never truly desired closure. Jonathan had vanished, and as for the unexplainable occurrences and their implications, some narratives are better left incomplete, without definite conclusions. The dark legend of those woods paled when juxtaposed with the malevolence that once resided within a man I deemed virtuous.